Oh good, a horror fan. I bet you just can't wait for that remake of Silent Hill 2 to come out.
Mary?
Unless you're one of those weirdos complaining about chins? Chins is it now, chins? Okay. But speaking of changes to Silent Hill, what did you think of everything they did to the 2006 movie? That's the question on today's Fact v Fiction, where we'll look at the change of Harry Mason to Rose da Silva, the similar swap the Ring movies made to Koji Suzuki's book, and we'll look at how we got to this type of character through the history of Japanese and American horror. I'm Rick, thanks so much for being here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Try to imagine going back to 1999 and playing Silent Hill again for the first time. Unlike Resident Evil, released 3 years prior, Silent Hill presented a new type of horror, psychological. It used the still new 3D technology to present a wide-open American town full of ambiguity rather than just gore. Keiichiro Toyama was just 26 when he directed Silent Hill. He worked with his programmers to create full polygon backgrounds, dynamic lighting, and even used the PlayStation 1's limitations to their advantage, adding fog to give an atmosphere that evoked eternalized feelings of horror.
Cut.
One of the people impressed with the game was French filmmaker Christophe Gans.
Everybody said, really? Is it possible to be frightened by a game? And I said, yeah, and it's one of the most absolute fear I ever experienced.
So enamored was Gans that he spent 5 years trying to convince Konami that he should be the one to bring Silent Hill to the big screen.
So then it was an adventure, because we had to go convince the Japanese people that produced the game, Konami, to give us the right to make the movie. And the only things that make the difference is the vision of Christophe.
And then, when he finally got the go-ahead, he sat down with writer Roger Avery and...
When Christophe was setting out to make this film, he and Sammy called me up. And so I came in, and next thing I knew, it was, what if we were to do this? And Christophe was, what if we reinvented the wheel?
Okay, sure, going from one medium to another, some form of adaptive change is necessary. Also, Gans, being a creative, is naturally going to have his own ideas and want to put his mark on the property. All that is totally fine. As the filmmakers say,
the one element that you must remain true to is the spirit of the material.
What is important is that we'll preserve the atmosphere of the game, which is the most important thing.
The most immediate and visible change was that of original Silent Hill protagonist Harry Mason becoming a new and original character, Rose da Silva. Naturally, you can see how the complete change of the central protagonist might worry fans.
The fan base for Silent Hill is very, very protective of the game.
But as Gans says,
I'm myself a gamer. I'm a true follower of the Silent Hill mythology, and a game is a game, and a film is a film.
Now this was 2006, firmly in the period when American horror cinema was adapting Asian properties left and right, thanks to the release of the Ring remake in 2002. During the height of this trend, a lot of changes were made to these movies, including centering them around a certain type of character.
Hey, Dad.
David Callett, author of J-Horror, describes the phenomenon like this. Time and again, the American public has been given access to the full-strength Japanese originals and has consistently voted with its feet to support only those J-horrors mediated by Hollywood blondes, Naomi Watts, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Kristen Bell, and there were a lot of other examples of this happening as well. Not to say there's anything against blondes, but it was a curious trend, and we'll look at some of that later. Now, Silent Hill was a Japanese-produced video game released in America, then adapted by a French filmmaker. But did it fall victim to the same trend, a Hollywoodization fronting a pretty blonde woman? Or did Gans have a more true to the spirit of Silent Hill reason? After all, he was a big fan of the games, and he knew how important this was to both Konami and longtime fans of the series. He must have had a good reason, right? It quickly became clear Harry never acted like a masculine character. He was constantly dizzy, fainting, talking to himself, screaming, and in fact was very vulnerable. We didn't want to betray the nature of the game by changing the character's feelings and motivations, so we felt it was better to change to a female protagonist and retain all those important qualities. I actually don't want to do a spit take. They're overdone anyway, and I don't want to ruin all my stuff, so... But anyway, wow! Right? So, There's a lot to unpack with that explanation. As a lot of people have pointed out, the idea of the character of Harry Mason feeling more like a woman is more than a little sexist. On two fronts, no less. This is especially bad because it's sexist against both men and women. Harry, he says, isn't a paragon of masculinity for being vulnerable, scared, and loving. That's textbook toxic masculinity. But he also associates women with being ditzy, fainting, screaming. Ridiculous. Also fun, this explanation from Gans had the dual effect of making the manly men crowd mad as well. Yeah, look at that chin, baby. Reminder that Harry could also beat the fuck out of everything with a big fuck off hammer. This motherfucker took down an ancient god with a hunting rifle and stomped on the corpses of demonic children. There ain't nothing feminine about that. Sounding more and more like the Doomslayer to me. They stapled a pair of tits to Harry. Is bear an option for me too? Can I choose bear? Hello, anyone? Bear? This explanation is so weird, given Gans' proclamations of staying true to the game. Here's what Toyama said way back about Harry while making the game. The main character is not a hero. He has and keeps his morals, but he is really just a plain, normal person. His motions, such as swinging around his items and trying to catch his breath after running, are not very cool or heroic, but after a while, it would be easier for a player to project himself or herself to the main character. And that last bit is a little interesting. Put that in your brain pocket for later. But it's this coup de grace of a tweet about Gans' statement that I think speaks the loudest. Fun fact, this exact sentiment helped produce the classic final girl horror movie trope. It was thought that audiences wouldn't want to see a man express fear and intense emotion, God forbid, so a woman was often chosen as the final survivor. Misogyny shapes our world in unpredictable ways. Who knew? The horror genre has a unique history with women characters. That final girl trope, first coined by Carol J. Clover in 1992, is where the last survivor is often a young woman, usually with some sort of preserved innocence that spares her and allows her to triumph in the end. But there's another character type that has also stubbornly persisted, the monstrous mother. In horror, when the woman or the girl is not the victim, she is most likely the antagonist, and it is her femininity which is often depicted as being at the heart of her monstrousness. Obviously, the moms in Carrie, Friday the 13th, and Psycho come to mind, but there's a different type of monstrous mother too, the helpless mother.
Show me how he works, okay? Hi!
The helpless mother is not directly the monster in the film, but she invites the evil in. One of the best examples of this is Chris McNeil in The Exorcist.
Yes. No, operator, don't tell me there's no answer. It's the Hotel Excelsior in Rome.
The book and the movie makes it very clear that if Chris wasn't a divorced working mother and had instead ensured a traditional nuclear family unit, her daughter Reagan may not have become possessed. And remember that traditional family stuff for later too.
Can you tell me the best way to get to Silent Hill?
Road don't go through no more.
We can see a little of that in Rose. She runs off with her child alone, disregards all warnings about Silent Hill,
Keep your seatbelt fastened, honey.
and gets into a high-speed chase with a cop while her kid is in the car, causing an accident. But while Final Girls and Helpless Mothers were usually reactive, Rose is certainly proactive, if in a very reckless way. So how did we get to that change? Well, there was definitely an evolution of female characters, even mothers, in the late 80s and 90s.
Get away from her, you bitch!
But I'd argue Dana Scully had the greatest influence in this genre. An FBI agent with a deep medical background, Scully presented a reverse in the usual gender dynamic, with her being the logical one, whereas Mulder was the one more guided by intuition and belief.
Yes, sir, but I have proof.
There's this phenomenon called the Scully Effect, where the character inspired a generation of women to enter STEM or law enforcement. This effect also translated to media, certainly in serialized TV in terms of female cops, but also in big screen horror. Going back to David Cowles' examples, these women were more evolved final girls. Like Scully, they were acting with their own agency, taking the lead in investigating the curse or haunting, following the string of clues, and usually discovering an injustice as the root cause of the disturbance. Whoa! Sorry for the jump scare there. I know they're kind of cheap, but sometimes they really do make good transitions into the next. Okay, note for editing, that's where I'm gonna add the Haunting of Hill House jump scare, the one where Nell screams from the back seat. Okay. Alright. Now, Scully and her archetype weren't without their own criticisms. Criminal investigators like Scully occupy both roles, investigators and investigated. She is targeted and victimized, while simultaneously working to reverse this victimization. And like how Gans couldn't disassociate women and motherhood, Scully couldn't escape being victimized by that either, even so far as to be forcibly abducted and impregnated by aliens and having a lot of her character arc dealing with the fallout of that.
Planned and executed by someone in this room.
And at the expense of her pursuit for justice, no less. Now, in a post-Roe v. Wade world where things are only looking somehow bleaker, wake up, Joe. Wake up! Wake up! I can only imagine how this fear of forced motherhood and horror can resonate.
You can't do this to me.
No, don't call me that. I'm not your mom. I'm not equipped to handle this. I don't even take care of my own plants.
But the problem with the final mother character is that more often than not, these movies make the case that embracing the forced maternity is the key to dispelling the disturbance.
You'd be a good mom someday, honey bath.
Eat the toppings, Katie.
I.e. a return to traditionality, either in family or the working place, that rights the world.
Mother is God in the eyes of a child.
Hey God, might want to double check your daughter's not possessed. And this is why I think Rose and the themes Gans was going for didn't quite work out in the Silent Hill movie.
The main theme of the film is who's a good mother, who's a bad mother.
Like what we saw, it's such a unique property that baggaging it with these kind of old tropes did it kind of a disservice. Not the only disservice, for sure.
Your reward is the truth.
But a significant one. And with that, let's take a look at our other final mother, Rachel. Quick fact v fiction intermission question. I mentioned Pulse back up there. Carol was a Japanese movie from 2001, eventually adapted for American audiences as Pulse in 2006. Well, apparently while trying to develop the American remake, they jerked around director Kiyoshi Kurosawa for pretty much the entire 5-year span between movies, asking him first to direct, and then bringing in Wes Craven, and then asking Kurosawa back when Craven dropped, only to end up not involving him at all in the end. But to twist the knife in a little extra, would you believe that the studio used footage from his Japanese movie in the trailer for the American version? True or false? Keep watching till the end to find out the answer. Before we examine Rachel, let's jump back to 1991 in Japan. Writer Koji Suzuki was not actually a fan of the horror genre, but he remembered his time teaching in which his students would ask him to tell scary stories, and he found he was very good at it, coming up with tales that sounded very relatable and even convincing his students that they were real occurrences. And so he wrote Ring, a story about an urban legend of a cursed videotape. Suzuki's protagonist was Kazuyuki Asakawa, a reporter who begins the investigation into the cursed tape after learning about the mysterious death of his niece and 3 friends. There was something different about Suzuki during the time he was writing this book. He was actually out of work and caring for his 2 daughters, who were sitting on his lap while he wrote, while his wife was the one going out and making a living for them. This was a bit unheard of, especially at the time. Suzuki was regarded as a phenomenon in Japanese society, part of the new man generation that was busy getting in touch with his feelings. He later wrote extensively on fatherhood and its responsibilities. Suzuki says, under the traditional patriarchal system, fathers never assumed any true responsibility for their families. They were basically just like symbolic figures. Throughout Japanese literature, the men are forever telling their wives to take care of everything while they stumble out into the outside world, blindly accepting what they see as the natural family order. Wow, that's incredible. Especially at the time he wrote Ring in '91, in Japan no less. As a man, that's so inspiring. Everyone, I think we found him. I think we finally found the man who gets it. But before we take away the crown of Woke Bae from Matt McGorry and give it to Koji, let me bring out my big old box of caveats for a second. Okay. What do we got in here? We got some old Joss Whedon. We got some Ian Fleming, Harry Potter. All right, where is it? Here we go. Okay. Anyone who's read the book will basically tell you that whatever Suzuki was going for really didn't translate to the page. The novel's Asakawa may have been motivated to protect his family, but he did a pretty poor job of it. His infantilization of his wife, treating her like a fragile glass doll instead of an equal, can hardly be said to be a positive image of Japanese manliness. Whoopsie! Also, trigger warning for sexual assault if you ever go and read it. Book Asakawa has a friend, Ryuji, who basically admits to assaulting multiple women, which Asakawa turns a blind eye to. Bear? Also, Sadeko, the evil spirit in the Japanese version, is intersex in the book, and it's implied that she welcomed her assault before her murder so she wouldn't die a virgin. Bear? Another reviewer writes, everything the male characters did, no matter how reprehensible, was written or laughed off as normal. And yet Sadeko's the monster? Well damn, maybe women should just throw our hands up and collectively enter our villain eras together. My man, he had heart, but boy did he miss the mark. In America, we have the final girl, but in Japan, we have what Khaled calls the dead wet girl. Her signature may be a spooky, dripping visage with long black hair covering her face, but the concept is a lot deeper. To summarize the dead wet girl, they are the lingering spirit, usually caused by some unresolved, deep or violent emotion following when the most innocent or vulnerable of society is not protected. And in the past, this often meant protection from things like the dissolution of the traditional family structure. Hey, remember that? Yeah, so sort of like Final Girls, Dead Wet Girls, or at least the ideas behind the concept, are a little antiquated. In each of these films, we find some departure from established traditions of how men and women are supposed to relate to one another and form families. These departures threaten the existing order and lead to anxious, uncertain futures. But as women increasingly turn away from established orthodoxy, they threaten the social order, something these films represent with monsters and ghosts. But by the time of the first movie adaptation of The Ring in Japan, the roles of women in society and media were evolving just like in America. Hideo Nakata was no stranger to Dead Wet Girls, having helmed Don't Look Up in 1996. He brought along writer Hiroshi Takahasi, who was raised by a single mother and teacher, and the two began to perform various changes to Ring, cheaply swapping the protagonist from the milquetoast Asakawa to a forceful career-focused and single divorced mother, Reiko. The change was seen as positively reflecting the changing gender dynamic in Japan, specifically the greater role women were taking on in taking charge of their own lives and careers. They were playing to an audience of young, independent women who were increasingly visible and vocal in Japan. Now, Suzuki was not a fan of this change. He chalks this change up to traditional Japanese patriarchy, a knee-jerk unwillingness to see a man as the true responsible father. But considering how hard he failed in his attempts, I don't know, it does seem like a positive change overall. Takahashi managed to enhance the very idea Suzuki wanted to promote. And Nakata has a very straightforward reason for why he wanted the change. I made Asakawa a woman because I like women. And honestly, that's all you need to say, King. But now let's look at Rachel.
Shit. Hey.
The main theme of the film is who's a good mother, who's a bad mother.
I really don't want to approach it that way. It feels very girl-fighty. Rather, I'd like to look at just how these women are depicted by their filmmakers and make judgments on their characterizations.
Before you die, you see the ring.
I like Gore Verbinski, and The American Ring is super slick and paced beautifully, but Rachel can't escape a lot of these final mother tropes.
Sorry I'm late.
The first time we see her, she's late in picking up of her son because she's too career-focused.
You're fired.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
Then she's objectified by the camera for no reason and is pretty much a helpless mother in leaving her son alone with the cursed tape. And it's especially when he's in danger that she shifts her focus to becoming more mother-like. Rachel is not a bad character in the end, and actually her motherhood is not what saves the day in The Ring. In fact, there is nothing that saves the day in The Ring. But that actually goes all the way back to Koji Suzuki's book. So, you know what, Koji? You're at the top of the caveat box now. There you go. You moved up. Reiko also isn't perfect. She does leave her son alone for long periods of time, and similarly exposes her son to the videotape curse. But I probably like the depiction of the Japanese characters a little bit better, and part of that has to deal with her ex-husband. Hey, that's something we haven't addressed yet. What about all the men we're losing here? I'm a man and I say we have thoughts on this. Why doesn't anyone ever ask men what they think of on the internet? Fuck off, Hammer.
There ain't nothing feminine about
They
that.
stapled a pair of tits. All right, that's why. Bear? Ryuji is smartly changed in the Japanese Ring movie, turning from an absolutely criminal assaulter to Reiko's ex-husband and father of her child. I do believe he's the reason for the divorce, but he and Reiko actually have an amicable relationship, spending most of the movie together, Mulder and Scully-like, trying to lift the curse from their son in unison. He also apparently has his own psychic leaning or is force-sensitive or something, again going back to the reverse gender dynamic of the X-Files.
It was very student film.
Compare that to Noah, who sucks.
I'm sure it's a lot scarier at night.
Nah, he's alright, I guess. He does do the whole giving Rachel a stink eye thing when he feels she's not being a good mother, and he's also there to mansplain videotapes to her.
Okay, when you record a tape, the makeup of the tracks is like a signature for whatever did the recording.
They also spend a lot of their Ring investigation apart, much like Rose and Sean Bean. In fact, a lot of these American adaptations downplayed or downright eliminated men. Going back to the VHS era, the Japanese Ju-on movies always switched between multiple characters and points of view. As did Pulse, and that's probably the most infuriating of the adaptations. And it's not like these guys were any closer to what Koji was aiming for, but these movies dealt a lot with the anxiety and isolation of the modern world, and I like the more diverse points of view, as opposed to just the singular. I'm not like trying to be a J-horror purist with all this, but like how Khaled said back in the beginning, the Hollywood blonde American versions are what most people know of these properties that actually had a lot more to say. And yes, Parasite Eve technically did this too, but the game is actually a sequel to the book, and Aya is way too awesome. No notes. If we go back to Toyama, remember how he said Harry Mason should just be a normal person that a player could project himself or herself onto? I honestly think Harry or Rose could work as any gender. Same with Asagawa. How we end up with these final mothers looks to me more like lazy reasoning or just general bad execution. And while I might lament the erasure of positive father figures in these movies, the horror genre has always been one where women are the most visible, especially when other movies are late to the game in fronting female characters. Horror has had a wide variety of fantastic ones lately, including a new examination of mothers. In recent years, there has been a noticeable shift from depicting individual, one-dimensional monstrous mother characters to instead embodying the pressures and anxieties of motherhood itself. The Babadook, Goodnight Mommy, and Hereditary can provide commentary on the expectations and challenges of motherhood. And I'm all in for that. We men will be okay. It's not like we're left out completely anyway. Just look at Ethan Winters in the recent Resident Evil Village, like the sacrifice that he makes to protect his family and daughter. Alright, good. I do have a late game save file, so I don't have to play through the entire game just to get this footage. We can turn our controller off. What? Oh no! Wait, why isn't the baby Chris? Wait. A little piece of advice though, if you're ever trying to capture an emotional scene from a video game, make sure you have all the mods turned off. But what do you think? Do you like the depiction of Rose regardless of Gans' weird reasoning? Which version of Ring do you prefer? And did I miss talking about any final mothers you've noticed? Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe. Also, to answer our intermission question, did the studio that screwed over Kurosawa for Pulse also steal some of his footage for the American trailer? Yes, it's this iconic plane crashing footage. The mods are off in Fluffy Manager. I don't understand why they're off. And I launched it from Steam. Like, if you launch it that way, the mods shouldn't be on anyway. I guess it could have been worse. It could have been the naked or the the gym shorts Chris with the huge package. I'd have to do a whole another video on that, dude. Final daddies. I could tune it next time.